Welcome to another episode of Breaking News, brought to you by Source Selection Soundbites. A protest was sustained against the agency regarding a very important price analysis issue. In an earlier soundbite, we mentioned that, when considering the labor mix, the contracting officer may consider how the labor categories quoted fit the requirements of the statement of work. The soundbite says the CO may consider instead of shall consider, because this analysis may take place during the compliance review. If the fit of the labor categories are not evaluated during the compliance review, it must be done before an award can be made. The labor mix analysis is as good a place as any to perform it. The analysis is frequently referred to as labor category mapping. In accordance with Spatial Front Incorporated, the referenced case, the analysis of whether the solicited services are within the scope of labor categories quoted from a FSS contract is a matter of technically acceptability. Thus, if this analysis is conducted as a part of the price analysis and the vendor fails to quote compliant labor categories, the price cannot be reasonable and is otherwise unacceptable. In this case, the protester asserted that a scope review of the labor categories did not happen as it was not reflected in the record. The agency countered by saying that it removed the requirement for labor category mapping in a prior amendment. Its amendment replaced the required labor category mapping with a review that only confirmed that all quoted labor categories were on its federal supply schedule. The agency also argued that raising an objection to the agency's failure to determine if the labor categories are within the scope of the contract was an untimely challenge to the RFQ, because the agency clearly said in the amendment that a different kind of analysis would be performed. The GAO disagreed with the agency's view that removing the labor category mapping requirement removed the agency's requirement to ensure services could be properly procured within the scope of the awardee's contract. Moreover, the GAO said, "For service contracts, regardless of whether a solicitation requires vendors to submit labor category mapping, ordering agencies are obligated to make certain that all of the services included in a vendor's quotation are within the scope of the vendor's FSS contract in order to satisfy the statutory requirement for full and open competition." The agency admitted that it did not complete the required exercise. Therefore, the protest was sustained. Now let's address a few of the lessons learned from this protest. They include: 1. The rules governing the schedule cannot be ignored or written out of the evaluation by the words of the solicitation. 2. If the labor categories submitted are not within the scope of the PWS requirements, the quotation is technically unacceptable. 3. An agency's consideration of federal supply schedule compliance must go beyond the existence of the labor categories on the schedule. And 4. The agency's consideration of the labor categories must be adequately documented to facilitate a meaningful judicial review. In this episode of Source Selection Soundbites, we discussed the Spatial Front Incorporated case and the lessons that should be learned from it. This concludes today's Source Selection Soundbite. If this video was helpful, hit the like and subscribe button to ensure you don't miss any new material. If you want more details on the subject, they are available on the Source Selection Answer app. It contains lectures, quizzes, court cases, sample documents, and more material that allow practitioners to quickly obtain actionable knowledge. Thanks for watching. See you next time.